Every year, thousands and thousands of titles are released on Steam. According to Krzyzewski, marketing consultant specialized in the gaming industry, when looking at 2023, more than 2,600 commercial games were released, games that have 50 or more reviews. While they include all types of genres and we could try to filter for specific ones, there would still remain enough to make the journey of finding something very, very hard. Of course, most people aren't willing to spend much time, and the front page shows trustable recommendations or your favourite YouTubers hyped about a specific title. Now imagine expanding this to outside Steam. From the depths of itch.io to the shores of game forums, a lot of titles die in obscurity, and well, there are good reasons for that. Maybe they are shovelware, your typical AI-generated slop, or the first production of someone who just learned how to create an RPG Maker horror title. 2 years ago, I would have believed that all unknown games fit that category. However, one day, someone recommended a specific game to me on Discord. A game that would change the way I see the entire medium. A visual novel with a very passionate community, more than 100 hours of gameplay, a sizable Patreon, constant releases, buried into what seemed to be word of mouth, without a Steam page, without any videos about it, or even one singular article. How was this even possible? Why did the server of the game have such a peculiar name, and why was this game called Out of Touch? Everything great starts with a decided design. While the original meaning of aesthetics was related to the philosophical school studying the nature of beauty and taste, according to a Vogue article written by Sarah Spellings, with time, it evolved into the appreciation of beauty. She also comments during the piece that currently, especially on the internet, we have aesthetics as a combination of sensorial factors and lifestyle that creates an identity. And while for some people, like herself, it may be hard to fit oneself within a specific aesthetic, the process of having or not having one is a creation of a self-brand, ultimately an artistic choice about your own life. With time, artistic production also started to accommodate these principles. If everything great starts with a decided design, now having one is a matter of making or breaking in the market. Cozy games are a fun example of aesthetics applied to art. Another good example is Out of Touch. Out of Touch brings a lot of personality in its design. When opening the main menu, you'll be visited by synthwave, an 80s-inspired electronic subgenre that got popular in the past 10 years or so, with visuals inspired by an era of movies called neo-noir, combining the classic black and white noir with saturated colours and neon. You may remember another game that used that design, Hotline Miami. And the idea is simple: nostalgia. For example, Hotline Miami is trying to evoke the feeling of playing a fast-paced game in an arcade, a dead culture that was very, very popular. Synthwave's influence in Out of Touch can be seen in different places, like for example the main character CJ's attire. His clothing is courageous, to say the least, but clearly inspired by how men dressed in the 80s. It also appears in the menus, the dialogue fonts, and the neon lighting used in a lot of scenes. However, while playing this game, you'll quickly notice that there is more than just synthwave. If you listen closely, you may hear different compositions of two particularly interesting genres: city pop and plunderphonics. While both genres aren't new, they got a lot of recognition on the internet. City pop is Japanese pop released in the 70s and 80s that you may hear at the beginning of the game with Last Summer Whisper, while plunderphonics is based on sampling a lot of other songs to make your own, like one of the most famous internet albums in history, Caretaker's Everywhere at the End of Time, used frequently during the game's psychological horror moments. They are very interesting genres by their own, but once they get mashed together, we get into what can be considered the soul of Out of Touch and the reason why a lot of people ended up knowing about it. Vaporwave. Vaporwave is an internet genre about returning to the past in every single way possible, from sampling all of city pop songs to over-exaggerating style elements of the 70s, 80s and 90s. It wants you to look to the past with the eyes of the present. For example, mallsoft is a subgenre based on USA's mall era, making bland, air quotes, music that could easily play in a mall, while Signal Wave tries to evoke memories of listening to television and radio, sampling pieces directly from before the internet. The desire to look to the past and scrape those memories, embrace them and critique them is what moves Vaporwave. Sometimes during your playthrough you'll be hearing vibrant pieces like Love to Miss or Horsey. At other times you'll be chilling with Afterglow, or weirded out by a distorted commercial in Always Always. All of those songs are so different and at the same time carry the sensation of visiting the past, remembering when life was good or life was simpler and trying to figure out if it actually was better, or if it's just a plastic false idealization. Out of Touch's choice of basing its entire identity and design on it makes for a signature, bold move. When I played for the first time, I didn't enjoy the music. I thought it was weird, dissonant even. Now, I think it's inseparable from what the game is about. Out of Touch's story is one of the most crazy, exciting, surreal works I've ever experienced. Being frank with you, this game isn't perfect. There are going to be moments you may dislike, poorly executed sequences, even moments that I believe shouldn't exist. However, from the first second of the game to its last, all cards are open on the table. You know what you'll get, and I'm pretty sure it won't be like anything you've seen before. How can I say that with such confidence? I just need you to take a look at one thing. I need you to take a look at the prologue. Everything starts with Victoria. She is a motherless 13-year-old girl who seemingly lives alone with her father. One day, he hallucinates and sees Ruruko, her dead mother and his former wife, in Victoria. Believing what he is seeing and driven to tears by this appearance, he tries to embrace and kiss her, only being taken away from the illusion when his real daughter smacks him. Taking a closer look, we see, for example, that when Ruruko appears, the lighting changes to a green colour, alluding to something alien. That perception is immediately rewarded by the constant appearances of what looks like a strange shadow, apparently responsible for the hallucination. We don't know what this shadow is or what it's trying to achieve, but we see how broken Victoria gets after the whole thing, after her father almost violated her. The game follows that dreadful scene with a calmer one, following our protagonist CJ going to school. Here we get to understand it takes place in Japan while being introduced to the main cast. Jamie is the shy friend, Teresa is the fragile empath, Ashley is the classic Kohai, and Leia is the flirtatious tsundere. Knowing their archetypes from the get-go makes it easy to understand those characters and create expectations. Are they going to follow them without any modifications, evolve their concepts, or subvert them? Also, I may or may not have hidden something that appears during that scene. We definitely will return here later. In the meantime, Leia mentions Victoria not being there. Apparently, that day was the anniversary of when her mother died. After remembering that, CJ feels like he needs to talk to her, and after walking Teresa to her home, he goes searching, finding her crying in the middle of a park. When he gets to her, she pretends that nothing is happening, but once they get to her house, she has an aggressive response and tells them to go to his house instead. At this point, it's established that he is a very sensitive person. He clearly wants to help her, he knows she is not fine, but instead of confronting her, he indulges her, following her to his house and watching some show together. Eventually they start to play around, and once he touches her forehead as a joke, she has a mental breakdown. See, it's clear the game was building to something. There was a devious combination of factors happening at that same day. Today was the anniversary of her mother's death, a clearly traumatic day, and a few hours ago, her father almost assaulted her. As research continually shows, childhood trauma may lead to mental illness down the line, and trauma survivors have difficulty regulating emotions such as anger, anxiety, sadness, and shame. Victoria was facing two traumatic events on the same day. It was no surprise she would have a breakdown. The problem is, CJ. We know they are close because his name is mentioned in more than one moment where she is anxious or in despair. And that means whatever happens here may be heartbreaking. The game prepared us for the punch and delivered an uppercut. she tries to have sex with him. Forcefully. At this moment, she realizes she's made the worst mistake of her entire life. She runs from him in a hurry, without letting him do or say anything. He tries to follow her even when his mother closes the door, very, very angry. After receiving a call from his father, she decides to send him overseas, ending this first sequence. That is a very, very strong opening to a game. The entire composition was brilliantly done, conveying well the idea of a traumatized young child hurting the person she is closest to, raising the question of how guilty she is or how CJ feels about what just happened. It's sad, it's emotionally distressing, and at the same time, shows what this game is about. After that, CJ is sent away to California, and in the airport, a very important character is introduced, Sarah, his sister. While they walk together, the narrator makes a point of both how good he feels around her and how vague she seems to be about some stuff. Coming from a very dramatic opening, this manages to keep the tension, even if the music says otherwise. However, once they sit over the shore, that feeling is dismantled as Sarah asks CJ about girlfriends, and he says that he sorta had one back in Japan. Here we acquire context on him and Victoria. A, they were childhood friends. B, he really liked, maybe even loved her. C, her mother died only a year ago. D, her father lost his mind and her older sister Julia became her legal guardian. The scene also shows that she made him a promise to keep her mother's ring, which she properly did, inserting it into a necklace, and finally, he doesn't seem to blame her for what happened, which is an interesting stance the game takes. After all, it means that CJ may perceive the events in another light. How will this end? We'll have to keep reading. Okay, until this point we had the normal part of the prologue. If it ended here, it would already be a very interesting start, short of the insane aspects I teased about though. However, do you remember that shadow that appears at the beginning? Nothing supernatural happened after that. Strange. After the night comes, Sarah says to keep looking to the horizon as CJ would be able to see his father and... Look, I think I will show you the following scene as was played because I do not have the words to describe it. Just watch.
Gaze upon thy lineage and rejoice.
Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
Yes, this happens! I interviewed some people of the community about that scene, and the reactions were split into laughter and, this game won't take itself seriously. To this day, I still think this was the most what the fuck moment I had in any piece of media. The guy who just appeared on the sky is Chad, a meme that was both created and popularized by 4chan, indicating a white, blonde-haired, athletic, sexually active man. You may be asking, why is this here? This was my question too, don't worry. But here's the catch. Actually, everything I discussed as being part of this game's identity, like the concept of aesthetics or vaporwave, is encompassed into something called internet culture. Out of Touch is one of the few games I ever saw actively using that language, both artistically and in narrative. There was a famous webcomic that also used internet language in that way and was very, very divisive for many reasons, including its identity. You may be thinking of a lot of reasons why one shouldn't do that, and still, here we are. The question on top of your head is this game a comedy? Even after the dramatic sequences we had before? What exactly is behind this? What is this game? It's time to discover by ourselves. Let's continue, with precaution. After the shock, Chad presents himself, confirming CJ's his child, explains he is proud of him for getting a harem, a peculiar choice of words, and asks him what he wants. CJ earnestly says he wants his friends back. As a direct answer, Chad unlocks the powers of his bloodline, purging negative traits like cowardice, timidity, helplessness, and indecision. Once the process ends, only one phrase separates us from a breakdown. Now it was up to him. The gifts had been given, he now had to accept them. How? That was his test. Do you remember what you heard before we entered this mess?
Do you remember sensation? Light finger touch, gently crossing your touch, tracing your heart line that crimson string, tensing and tugging. One day its source. Do you remember one touch? I remember touch.
Didn't you want answers? Welcome to the past, or the future. We don't know what this person is, but you'll see later that he looks very similar to the grown-up CJ. We also don't know where the fuck this is. The creatures are spawning from the coloured television surrounding him. As he stands up to fight, he summons a Kitsune companion and later invokes the presence of 4 other entities, far bigger in size and with divine silhouettes. Now, before we continue, remember I said we will return to the scene where we met the girls? Well, look for yourself. At this moment you may be able to answer the question, is this game not taking itself seriously? Improbable. A purely comedic game wouldn't make something like that. We can see from this detail alone how relevant the supernatural aspect is to the game, and how paying attention to the details may be rewarding. Here is what Out of Touch is about. A combination between internet culture, character drama, and supernatural elements. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. This is why this prologue is so important. We have in this piece one of the most earnest starts in the entire industry. The entire hand is revealed for anyone to see. Did you enjoy what you saw? Have any interest in continuing? If nothing has caught your attention, I thank you for watching up to here and see you in the future. Having said that, if you are still here, this means there is a good chance this game is for you. And if this is true, please, allow me to continue. After he summons those entities, we see him harnessing their power into his weapons, allowing him and his Kitsune companion to easily kill the static-looking enemies. Then, with the end of the battle, we can see a bit of the surroundings, including 4 coloured pillars, 1 blue-green, 1 yellow, 1 purple, and 1 orange, similar to the colours from the summoned entities. Looking further, it's notable they are linked together by black and white rings. This could just be some sort of decoration or something to keep an eye on, especially considering we already know that somehow the entities are connected to the main cast. In sequence, he opens a rift with his key door while his companion says a few interesting words.
Through that doorway, no one can follow you. Not even me. Don't spend a single moment worrying about me. You have far greater concerns than I. Just do what you must. Save them.
Save who? The sequence ends with CJ waking up from what looks like a dream, connecting the two different timelines. We don't know how much of this was real or how much he actually remembers. Not that would matter now, as he was determined to solve things. He wanted to talk to Victoria. After a few moments he calls her, and after small talk, he affirms that even if a lot had happened between them, he wouldn't abandon any of his friends. He would return. Even after what Victoria did to him, he still wants to return. Things are more complex than they look, aren't they? The game at first glance doesn't want to establish her as a villain, which makes sense. They're children, and she was clearly suffering from trauma. This doesn't excuse what happened, still, we won't burn a 13-year-old trauma survivor for being broken. He clearly needs therapy as fast as possible, and a social safety net too. During the call, he decides to do everything he can to take destiny into his own hands. During the next few years, he gets closer to Sarah, improving his physical and social skills, and on his 18th birthday, he returns to his hometown with her. Finally, after so long, may I present to you the final sequence of the first chapter of the game. Yes, everything that happened was one fucking chapter! And this ends the beginning of our journey. Wasn't that a fun mess? Out of Touch is filled with everything, from disturbing moments to teenage drama, mystery, supernatural elements, and even internet-based comedy and language. How many games can you say that could pull this off? The prologue was insanely good, pointing out exactly what to expect from the game, while raising a lot of questions that can be answered by downloading the game and playing it. But, hey, question. How did you find this game? Remember when I said I discovered this game on Discord? I meant it. If you don't know that this game exists, you won't be able to find it. In terms of search engine optimization, Out of Touch is a famous song of the 80s duo Hall & Oates. In terms of marketing, there is none, for reasons you'll discover soon. And in terms of localization, it can't be on Steam. The reason? Graphics. That anime-y style is a result of a game/rendering tool called, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Koikatsu, a proprietary tool without a commercial license. It'd be literally illegal to sell on Steam anything made with it. This also includes Epic and GOG. So what can be done? Place the game on itch.io, of course. For those who don't know, itch.io is the biggest hobbyist indie store out there. It's very easy and free to set a game there, and a lot of famous projects like HoloCure, Doki Doki Literature Club, and Vampire Survivors had their first releases there. You can also set any monetization system you want, from subscription only to name your price. Very handy for developers. Despite that, it's very hard to find new games to play as itch.io's search is terrible, and it is also devoid of a proper review system, so you can only see the average rating without seeing what people wrote on their reviews. So while this is a good option for a store, it doesn't do any favours for the games there. What remains? Forums. Forums are the ultimate word of mouth. People share experiences, ideas and products related to a specific topic, and depending on how well known it is, posts there have better chance of being run through passionate people, ones that may start an organic word-of-mouth process, spreading them across the internet. In a way, Discord is very reminiscent of forums, and I found the game by being in a server of another visual novel, Eternum. However, there was a forum that I didn't know existed before engaging with Out of Touch's server, and yet it's very popular, containing thousands and thousands of posts, millions of comments, a dedicated community, and a peculiar name. F95 Zone. Up until this point, this entire video was about what the game is and how I feel about it. Now, we are entering another territory. Other people's opinions. And on F95, we've a lot of them. Opening the game's page there, you'll see a small description that seems to fit what I showed you before. Going down, the discussion page was 279 pages. What the fallopian tubes? I won't read any of it to you or we would be here for ages. So what remains for us, and honestly what'll matter for today, the review tab. Let's read some of them. 5 stars. This game is amazing. The first few chapters of the game are slow and a bit confusing as far as the story goes, but stick with it. The story really picks up and it's very gripping. Not many games can make me feel anything, but Out of Touch really caught me off guard. Depending on how fast you read this game, it can take about 35 to 40 hours currently, and it's not even halfway finished. I do have to mention that I love all the characters, even the side and cameo characters. I do wish the main character had better character growth, but I think we'll see a spike in character development by the halfway mark as we're already seeing him grow a bit. The music fits every scene in this game and that's amazing. It really pulls you in. 10 out of 10, can't wait to see how the story continues. 1 star. The game is definitely pretty and the characters are interestingly designed, at least aesthetically. However, the style of storytelling is way too ambitious and confusing from the get-go, and gets worse somehow. And the dialogue is at every single point extremely verbose and dragged out. The story is completely nonsensical and not engaging in any way whatsoever, and the characters act in completely unbelievable ways. And they are in similar way that they could be merged and the cast cut in half. I honestly don't get how this game has a positive rating. I guess if you keep pressing this control key to skip the dialogue, the visuals are okay. 5 stars. Slow as hell, but honestly a great story so far. The main character is actually fairly secondary, more like a vehicle for all the other yanderes have a divine battle over. Or you can think of the main character like a legendary bard, bolstering his allies to extreme levels while standing back and chilling. Yes, it is slow, give it a chance. And my personal favourite, 1 star. One of the most pretentious pieces of work I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through on this site. Out of Touch is a bunch of overly complex, unnecessarily dragged out story beats where you're forced time and time again to see the same fucking shit over and over from different characters' perspectives. What could be shown to the audience in just a few minutes instead takes several mind-numbing hours because the developer just can't help it. They can't help but pad up the runtime to no end through a ridiculous amount of random psychedelic visuals and unnecessarily vague dialogue to the audience in hopes they stare at it and go, "Wow, I'm 14 and this is so deep." Well, give them props because people are falling for it hook, line and sinker. This visual novel is like 4 years old at this point, and there are, I think, 100 chapters planned. At this point, it won't be complete until 2030. Not because it actually takes that much work, because the developer can't pace for shit. I don't know who the hell this novel is made for. If you want actually good and plentiful content, this visual novel is not for you. If you want an actually engaging, well-paced narrative, this visual novel is also not for you. This novel is nothing more than developers' personal pleasure piece. I give the props to those who are staying along for the ride, but as for me and my sanity, I'm out. Okay, there must be something right. You see a 5-star review, a 1-star review, then another 5-star review, and another 1-star review. You may think I nitpicked them, but almost all of them follow that pattern. Some 5 stars, some 1 star. When you look at them, you start to wonder why. Why is everyone saying something very different? Like they had played a different game altogether. Why is this game so divisive after all? Nothing we saw completely answers that question. Yet. Here's a part of the video where you're presented with a twist that'll change the way you perceive everything. Did you think it was weird that this game would be in a forum called F95 Zone? That will have such a passionate community and no marketing? That I have been hiding something from the reviews? You see, as I mentioned before, eventually CJ, as an adult, returns to reunite with his friends, and the game continues to explore his relationships with his friends and the women in his life. Adult relationships. And in this exploration of their adult relationships, the game does not at all shy away from very clearly and explicitly showing a certain aspect of adult relationships wherein, how do I put this in a way that YouTube won't demonetize me? You see, when 2 adults love each other very much, they... Mr. Reed, would you like to explain this for me?
You slammed her, you dumped her donut, you gave her dog a sausage, you stuffed her like a Thanksgiving turkey!
Thank you very much. Out of Touch is a
Post some
porn
pictures of your grandma.
game. You probably have many questions. What they are depends on your views about sexual content, sex, and
Bible
pornography.
studies.
Nevertheless, there was a specific question I can guarantee you asked because it was also a question I asked once I actually played the whole thing. Why? Why is this a
Making
porn
room for Jesus.
game? To even start explaining that, I need to give you context. Out of Touch is a visual novel. a game that combines static and animated illustrations with elements of interaction like dialogue choices or minigames. You saw how this works during the prologue. The thing is, in recent years, some visual novels become very popular. Doki Doki Literature Club is an example, Class of '09 is another, which brought a lot of people to the genre. A lot of people who don't know that there isn't really a distinction between visual novels and so-called adult visual novels. See, when games got relevant in the early 80s, porn games rose. In 1982, Seduction of the Condomian Wife was the first commercially successful eroge, portmanteau of erochiku gemu, which means erotic game, rising Koei, known today by the Dynasty Warriors series, to relevance. During the next few years, more eroges would release, all with a simple premise, a game with a disposable plot where you could have sex with a woman. However, as the Japanese market grew tired of the same thing over and over again, Elf released Okusei 1992, revitalizing it by showing that sex could be, instead of the product itself, a reward, achieved by actively following the story of a specific girl. Things got even more interesting when Shunisoft, yes, the one that merged with Spike and distributed Danganronpa overseas, released in the same year Otogurusou, a non-pornographic adventure mystery game with a plot twist. Multiple endings could be achieved. The true evolution here was the fact that it combined background pictures with music, showing text on the screen that moved the story forward. This concept was patented as sound novel. Combining those two ideas, Leaf entered the market with a relatively successful Shizuku 1996 and Kizutao, and the next year achieved a huge success with To Heart 1997. They made a gamble that fortunately paid off. It was a simple game, no gameplay features that needed a lot of attention or balance. It had great visuals, good music, and a tasteful storyline. Players identified themselves with some of the characters, especially Multi, a little maid robot. Looking at the industry, seeing a game as simple as To Heart that could be done by small, dedicated staff getting a lot of recognition made everyone realize that doing eroges in that way could be far, far more lucrative. Therefore, establishing the sound novel genre. Of course, it was patented, so they needed to use a new name. They called them visual novels. Wait, visual novels were born from
Abstinence.
Games? Yes. What happened is that the genre matured with time and started evaluating the needs of having sexual content, especially to appeal to a broader audience. The essence kept the same though, tell a story focused on the characters with great visuals and music. With that image in mind, I can clear some of the perceptions that
Saving yourself before marriage.
games are devoid of artistic value. Unfortunately, that isn't enough to explain why Out of Touch is a porn
Nuns and wholesomeness.
game. If we can do a visual novel without sex, I use it. I ask myself this question a lot. I even discussed it with a wise, handsome, intelligent, creative, funny, humble, shameless, and handsome friend that is providing his siren song of a voice to this video more than one time. Out of Touch is far, far bigger than the sex in it. The prologue you just saw should be indication of that, so again, why? Today, I think I have a good answer. Sex is a taboo subject in society. The fact that this video has had to censor mentions of it at every turn, and we had to tiptoe around even bringing it up until this point, kind of speaks to that. Sexual education, even today, isn't the norm for many, many teenagers and adults. A lot of people have contact with porn sooner than they should, warping the views of sexual relationships. I was one of those people. If it wasn't by actually getting interested in understanding how women actually felt about those things, reading articles and watching videos, I would have believed the illusion. The way we treat sex creates an environment where people look to it as a mere transactional gratification and nothing more, where sex is the ultimate reward and not just a natural thing that most humans do. One of the consequences of that negligence is, for example, the existence of a considerable amount of men thinking, if I am nice to a woman, I deserve to have sex with her, which has a host of problems. In this current situation, we have a dilemma on our hands. If we try to naturalize sex and don't show sex, we're treating it like an unnatural thing. Of course, thinking in terms of teenage/adult media, which doesn't help to solve the problem. However, if we show it, it's fairly easy to ruin it by making it feel like a reward. Or worse, by turning into a shock value element. So not doing anything is bad, but trying and failing can have terrible consequences. How do we solve this? Fortunately, a 2019's Netflix comedy series lights the path. In Sex Education, we see Otis, a sexually repressed teenager, son of a sex therapist that ends up helping one of his peers with a Viagra-related problem. Maeve, a feminist, punkish girl, convinces him to start an underground sex therapy clinic to earn money while helping the students. One of the reviews of the series, made by Prahlad Shari on the first post, and I really hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly, if I'm not, I apologise, gives a lot of insight on how that concept ends up working. While the show's storyline may not be realistic, its issues are very much real. The mythology surrounding penis size to the unrealistic expectations about sex perpetuated by pornography. It also takes a particularly nuanced and non-judgmental approach to exploring topics like sexual identity, slut-shaming, body image, abortion, and homophobia. Sex Education aspires for an honest communication of some veritable sticky situations that adolescents all over the world often find themselves in. These relatable characters with complex backstories are what separates Sex Education from most other teen sex comedies. The show's writers display a sincere regard for the teenage experience, acknowledging all the awkward and discomforting eventualities that come with it. From the preposterous plot synopsis offered by Netflix, you may go into Sex Education expecting hilariously irreverent teen sex comedy, but you'll surely walk away with something far more insightful and painfully beautiful. Fuck, so it's actually possible to do a story like that. It's hard, of course, but it's just about using sex as a narrative tool while incorporating the story, in the relationships between the characters, showing the problems surrounding it. If I said to you that Out of Touch does exactly that, would you believe me? Yeah, it turns out for being an air quotes porn game, it actually has less sex than you would expect. There are 3 accounts of sexual scenes in the first 15 chapters, and 2 between the next 7. Even later, when the sex frequency increases, we are still talking about 4 to 6 scenes in 7 chapters. And almost every time it happens, it's incorporated into the story. Usually to develop a character, but also to discuss and incorporate deeper topics. This allows the narrative to explore, for example, the full perspectives of a polycule, a polyamorous relationship where everyone in the group loves each other, or to show a woman learning how to deal with her feelings, especially in such an early stage of her adult life. It also uses sex to touch complex topics like control/free will and obsession, allowing far more reflection than you would expect of a game like that. I'd be lying if I said to you that every single scene is perfect. Even so, it is a very earnest, fair showcase of different types of relationships and how they actually feel like, both from a monogamous perspective and a polyamorous one. Out of Touch is a sexually explicit game with attractive characters. It's about the different types of love, its manifestations, and its problems. It's about supernatural entities, complex timelines, and strange powers. And finally, it's a game with a lot of references to internet culture, both in design and story. All of those sentences are equally true. When I interviewed the author of this game, Story Anon, regarding it, one of the questions I asked was about its main inspirations, and its answer was very revealing. Mahayana and Vaporwave for sure. Side by Side is an artifact of internet culture, and one of the 3 main branches of Buddhism. Themes so distant that this phrase alone almost looks like a fucking shitpost. And yet they work together very well. I could spend hours and hours discussing the intricacies of this game, from how the author makes a whole arc about parental abuse and control, to how being a good human has its price. Instead, allow me a final question. Why did I write this script? Of course, I won't be able to convince you with a video alone that a sexually explicit game is good. If you had a bad experience with them, if you have regards about sexually explicit material of any type, or if you don't like sex at all, which is completely normal, you probably feel alienated. So what? How can I answer this question? Surprisingly, it's a very simple answer. Out of touch is a singularity. How can you look at something so beautiful and not want to share it with the world? How many pieces of media can combine sex, the supernatural, internet culture, psychological traumas, and philosophical discussion like this game does? It's not a game for everyone. Some of the reasons for why I enjoy the game may be reasons why you won't, and it's okay. Still, this is the beauty of art. If made by someone that loves its craft, no matter how controversial the final result is, it's bound to have a powerful meaning. One that can resonate in the hearts of some and change their lives in a lot of ways, like it did for us. I want to end this whole piece with another answer Anon gave to the interview. When I asked him if he expected the game to get to this point, he simply answered, "No, this is already far above what I ever thought Out of Touch would achieve." And Anon, if you're watching this video, thank you. I hope that more people can appreciate what you created. This video was a collaboration between Omni, the scriptwriter, Luna Corver, the handsome, dashing, and incredibly sexy voice of this video, and the amazingly talented and utterly beautiful, lovely GG13, who edited this together. We can't provide a direct link to the game thanks to its nature. However, if you search Out of Touch game or enter on the Discord, you'll get to the itch.io page where you can download it. If you want to support Story Anon, I'll link his social media description. Thank you for watching this video. I don't know if I'll see you soon, but it was fun. Bye!